So the topic today is cultivating a single-minded focus, and how that might be a journey between sometimes a more narrow or single-pointed focus with concentration perhaps on breath or another object of meditation, and then cultivating a single-minded focus in more the Zen style or a just sitting style, where choiceless awareness, where the single-minded focus is completely broad and encompasses everything. So we may approach meditation in different ways and have a different emphasis in our own practice life. Perhaps we have a particular affinity, and then sometimes through the practice of long years in dharma practice, we may move from certain practice techniques to other practice techniques, be informed by different teachers, different ways. I mentioned the Buddha at the beginning. I think the Buddha was certainly a meditator, right? It's just like I think it's fair to say he's somebody who loved meditation and practiced a lot of meditation, because he practiced before enlightenment, after enlightenment, and always taught meditation. I bring that up because meditation and what is often the goal of meditation, so-called awakening or enlightenment, is that enlightenment or awakening is not contingent on meditation, right? But maybe perhaps more likely to be discovered or realized through meditation, but not dependent upon. When the Buddha was alive in the world, apparently in that time, in the Ganges Valley area, there were many different schools of meditation that were being practiced during that time. It was a very rich time for the practice of meditation in different spiritual traditions, and that it said that he mastered certain techniques and certain practices, amongst them a couple of different disciplines of breath meditation. I wonder how many of you were following your breath, or counting breaths, or using the breath as a point of contact during our sleepy afternoon sitting. I say that's maybe for the room. Maybe I'm projecting a bit. I'm a little sleepy today. Maybe everybody on Zoom is like, what are you talking about? No sleepiness over here. They're like just sitting wide awake. But often the breath is a wonderful point of contact for our sitting, and we should certainly not think that it is a practice to be graduated from, or just a beginning practice, right? But in a relative sense, that breathing meditation does certainly help cultivate a single-minded focus. So if we're new to meditation, we'll often be given breath awareness as a practice to work with. As human beings, our minds tend to be very busy with a lot of thoughts and a lot of noise sometimes that's happening between the ears. And a lot of the work of our meditation may be really coming to terms with, or adjusting to, how do we adjust our relationship to that content, so that it doesn't feel that we're fighting with our own mind, that we're tussling with the content of mind. So often we'll start with a concentration technique, which is something of a redirection for attention. So our attention, which may be very disparate and involved in usually the identity of me and my life and things that are going on with me in the world, is given a point of contact which isn't involved in that, and said, okay, attention, go here to breathing, and stay with the breathing and begin to let thought go. Put it down for a period of time. when we do that, we're cultivating that attention in the moment, then naturally the tension and the stress of the not being able to switch off that thinking, weighing, judging, comparing mind, that begins to naturally fall off. And then we're practicing meditation, we're cultivating present awareness, and we're letting go of that thinking mind. But in an effort toward what? In some ways, the letting go of stress, the letting go of confusion or puzzles or things that are going through the ears, that's like a kind of a side benefit in one sense. It's like we can certainly have the benefit of dropping off those things which are causing us to be agitated. But as those things drop off, then we come much closer and start to really lean into our essential nature, our essential being. The very fact of the matter, like being here, experiencing the world as this one. Right? In a conventional human experience, then that is goes through the lens of me. Like experiencing this one, this me, I, self, with all of the causes and conditions and preferences and relationships and stories that are attendant around that. But as a meditator and as a dharma practitioner, that's not the work we're involved in. It's important to explore that work in other modalities and in other ways. But the time in practice, the time in still sitting, is not the time to unpack and involve ourselves in that me, I identity. Right? Because that me, I identity is never going to wake up. That's what the Buddha realized. It's like this one here doesn't get enlightened. Right? So we can let that go. Right? This one here doesn't get enlightened. If we look at the Buddha's particular story, in that he goes through learns all of his meditation, becomes the A+ student in every tradition, and becomes the most ascetic of the ascetics, and yet can't become a Buddha, can't become a person, one who is completely awake. And it's a very high goal, like really shooting for the limits here. It's like wants to become deeply enlightened and completely awake, and cannot become so. It's only at the end of the journey, through becoming so weak and emaciated, of like falls in a river and almost drowns, and then is rescued, and then through the actual complete collapse of the project, the abject failure of all of the years spent in pursuit of something, just the complete failure and the collapse of that, which then opens the possibility of achieving the goal. The actual letting go and the complete bottoming out in a spiritual sense. In the Zen tradition, there are a couple of koans that talk about enlightenment that says, one is a recollection of there's a student who's very diligent, who is sitting all the time, which that's very common in Zen Buddhism. Do a lot of sitting, getting there early, leave late, right? It's like very driven to sit a lot. And this person's teacher sees them like making this great effort and says, what are you doing with all of this meditation? What are you doing with all of this sitting? And he says, I'm trying to become a Buddha. It's, duh, like, isn't that the point? That's why I kind of joined the temple, I'm trying to become a Buddha. And then some time goes by, and then they're doing some work, and the student sees his teacher polishing a tile on a stone, like kind of working on this tile, and it's like, what is he doing on this tile? So asks him, why are you polishing that tile? And he says, I'm making a mirror. And the student says, you're not ever going to be able to make a mirror by polishing that piece of tile. And he says, and in the same way, you'll never become a Buddha by meditating. So that's one story. Another is, there is a koan where there is an ardent practitioner, it says, who sits contemplating a tree. That's a nice sitting practice. Sits and contemplates a tree. And through 10 kalpas, which is, a kalpa is an age of a universe. One age of a universe. So through 10 of those, through 10 kalpas of contemplation, cannot become a Buddha. And then the question of a koan is why not? Right? But I reminded us all at the beginning is, as we're sitting here as human beings, we're also sitting here as Buddhas, an awake one. That's what that name means. So how long do you have to practice to become what you already are? Right, it's a curious irony of dharma practice and meditation. Making effort to wake up to who you have always been from the beginning. Like that's the absurd story arc, right? And yet, for each one of us, that's the journey that we go on as meditation practitioners, as dharma practitioners. Like go on a quest and a mission to wake up and more deeply realize who we've already been from the beginning. But we're forward-looking creatures. We like to take the next step, and we like a sense of mission to achieve something. But that curious mission in this case is to deeply realize who and what we already are, already from the beginning, always without lack and without gain. Now, our sitting practice with the cultivation of breath awareness or any other object of meditation is really helping to let go of the constant interruptions of the mental clutter. Right? Because we find that we can be easily disturbed by our own narrative that is unfolding in our mind and become quite easily often hooked by that. Right? We might sit and, some not so interesting thoughts or comments running through the mind, and we might find that quite easy to let go of. But then as 10, 15, 20, 25 minutes goes by, maybe something really interesting comes up. Maybe something like particularly captivating comes up. Or perhaps we don't even notice that we have slipped back into the thought stream and we've started adding and constructing story and thought and narrative. And that's when we interrupt that and then just come back to the breathing. That's like our curious practice. Now, through breath awareness, though, through the focusing on the object, we can become adept at being still, quiet, and concentrated. And through being still, quiet, and concentrated, open the focus up so that we start letting more and more into our field of experience, into the field of awareness, ultimately without any limit. Ultimately letting the whole world in, internally and externally, letting everything be as it is. But that, of course, is typically easier said than done. Ajahn Chah, the great Theravadan teacher, I thought I should mention Ajahn Chah because Francis here, and it's like a nod to the great Theravadan teachers. Ajahn Chah talked about a still forest pond. Right, there's some wonderful writing where he brings that up about sitting like a still forest pond. That's a nice one for a hot sleepy afternoon perhaps, right? Where you come in and you sit, and rather than being the object, the subject of everything that's occurring, you take the position or become the container that is experiencing. everything. Like a still forest pond. Right? You can imagine a still forest pond in the area where Ajahn Chah practiced, right? In the deep forests. The deep forests are very busy places. There's a lot going on. They're noisy. It's full of life. There's everything that's happening. In one sense, when I take a walk down 2nd Street earlier, that's a kind of a different kind of jungle. It's the urban jungle. It's like the bar with the sports game and the people like kind of everybody up and down the street, people having a meal, people shopping, people doing all kinds of things. A different kind of jungle. That's our lives, and yet when we come in here, we enter into the still forest pond, like a place where we have a space which is open and quiet, which helps skillfully to lead us to the still forest pond, which is actually always here, always available. You sit down and just sit, stop, watch. In a room like this, often, there isn't so much going on. Sit, stop, watch, and most that happens in the pond is the content of our own mind. Like thoughts swimming around like fish, right? Things going on, but it can be quite still in here. Other times when we sit, other times in our life, it's less like a still forest pond and much more like one of those. I remember watching a nature program. I loved nature programs when I was a kid, like in the UK it would often be David Attenborough. It's like I think they did a whole series on like Earth, one of the amazing series that they do, and I think they had Oprah narrate it over here, and in the UK they had David Attenborough. And no comment on which one was better, but yeah, in one of these, I remember watching one of these episodes where it shows like a shrinking oasis in the African savannah when the hot season's coming, and then water, which was plentiful, starts to disappear, and then you have a watering hole which starts to get smaller and there's less of them. And then more animals start to come and it gets busier. And then it's like, oh no, the hyenas are here. Or you get to the watering hole and it's just like, oh my God, the hippos came. It's like, and then the violence starts to break out at the watering hole. And it's kind of like the episode. And I'm bringing that up because sometimes the still forest pond, when we sit, is very busy. It's very busy. There's all kinds of things stirring up the mud, right? And when you sit very still and quiet, you might even notice things that are deeper and older still. Things that start to come up, which is more like kind of an alligator moving through the water. Right? So the still forest pond is not necessarily just a kind of a blissful, quiet, clear, wonderful container where we can completely relax. To really be the container, you have to allow it to be exactly how it is, no matter what the causes and conditions. Sure, sometimes it's very nice, we sit, we meditate, it's quiet, it's peaceful, we feel like, oh, that's very nice, I had a great sit. Other times when we sit, when the deeper aspects of our conditioning, the deeper aspects of the way that we map the world, ourself, and reality, then it can be frightening at times. It can be deeply disturbing at times. Right? But we sit through it all. We sit through it all. We continue to practice. We continue to meditate. I was thinking when we sat earlier, it was wonderful and quiet in here, and then a dog, the dog at the beginning sounded like getting into, that sounded more like the kind of a watering hole outside, like a fight broke out. But sometimes it's like that in our own practice life. You sit and there's a fight that's broken out in your own mind. often like with yourself or with other people. The encouragement there with this single-minded focus is whether it's narrow, whether you sit, just breathe through everything. The breath is wonderful in that sense because no matter what the causes and conditions, you breathe in, you breathe out. Breathe in and you breathe out. And there's all kinds of difficulties that can come, there's all kinds of frustrations that can come, but you breathe in and you breathe out. And then in the art, as that focus broadens, as you sit with a broader focus perhaps, letting the sounds of the dog, letting the sounds of the street, letting everything come in, as all of that comes in too. Allow, allow, allow. No matter if it's busy or quiet. The really radical shift is to let go of the preference around content. It really is. I mean, I say it quite often in talks, but I find that to be true. Like there is a truth there that if you allow this experience of what you are as you are to be so, no matter how it appears, if you can let go then of the choice around that, the preferences around that, whether you find it agreeable or not, and just allow all things to come to the pool for a drink. All the dangerous creatures and all of the friendly creatures too, of your own nature, of this whole world. Like everybody gets to drink. Everything can come and be seen. When you do so, then you are a choiceless container, a choiceless awareness that allows this world internally and externally appearing. That's right, your internal world, own story, thoughts about this and that, how we're doing at the moment, and then the external world, however that's arranged, wherever you are. How about you take the radical step of just declaring peace with this, no matter how this appears? Then there's truly nothing to do but sit. There's nothing, and you're already sitting, so you don't have to do that. You just have to do that at the beginning, and then it's not doing anything more, and not looking for anything more, not trying to become a Buddha, not trying to polish a tile to make a mirror, not trying to get enlightened, not trying to do anything at all, but radically just not even making peace or establishing peace. It's all peace at the core. Awareness is free and clear and peaceful in its nature. Everyone already is that. The world is that. It's all our thoughts about what that means or how that works that gets us into all of the complications. Right? We're bombarded with narrative all of the time, the world's narratives, and then our own narratives. And meditation is a time to put the pen down, don't clack the keyboard, just let the narratives rest. Let the world rest, let yourself, this one, rest. As the pool, as the container. Not needing to have any kind of identity there at all. And of course we have that identity in me, I'm as, if sometimes we can get in trouble in Buddhism by misunderstanding non-self. Like there's no self. It's like, I'm like 53, I've been doing this for 25 years. If there's no self, then this is an extraordinary illusion. I'm as much me, I as I've ever been. Right? But it's not all me, I. When me, I takes up all the bandwidth and swallows all of the oxygen and drinks all of the water in the pool, which me, I is happy to do, then that is a dissatisfactory human experience. Because me, I is never happy, is never satisfied, never becomes enlightened. That's okay. That's the human condition. That's what we are, at least for this period of time. But a time for meditation, a time of sitting, is to let human nature rest. A human being can't do that. But a Buddha, which is what you are too, is nothing but aware rest. That is always allowing, that is always sitting, that is always can smile, like the Buddha here, and just allow the world to be as it is, with no problem in any direction. So for at least the 30 minutes of sitting that you come in, you can decide, for this 30 minutes of time, I'll be a Buddha. I'll sit as a Buddha. Why not? And again, not taking that as some special term, but as like the meaning of the word. One who is awake to the world. One who is awake to thus. The way things are in every direction. With no problem. And I say no problem, and that often is just like, well, hold on, what about? That's when the human being says, hold on, Buddha, give me the mic. I've got some issues I'd like to talk about. Right? Both can happen, both are happening all of the time. That's that curious thing. But if we don't practice, if we don't give some time to sitting, if we don't give some time to mindful awareness, if we're not returning and coming back to this, then we drift and we get lost in the human realm again. We get lost in the human doing for which there is no end. Well, no, there is an end to that too, right? So that's a little bit just around single-minded focus, whether narrow or broad.
Hi, I'm Robert Lurie with Long Beach Meditation. Your gracious generosity makes this programming possible. If you found this video to be of value, please consider making a donation here. And if you'd like to watch more videos like this one, click here. And if you want to stay up to date with Long Beach Meditation, click here to subscribe. Thank you.